Back when I was doing the Godzilla with the Glasses retrospectives, one aspect of the franchise neglected were the completely unpopular Godzilla novels written in anticipation of the American remake. There were four novels by Mark Cerasini and three children's books by author Scott whatever that is. I actually found one of them in a used bookstore once, after I had already bought it online. Oh well, it's still a fascinating look into the Godzilla universe from a literary perspective. To my knowledge, it's never been done before, writing a novel about Godzilla. I once read there were some novelizations of the films in Japan, but I can't seem to find any evidence of it. There was a novelization of both American films, the most recent one being a big hit. Yeah, there's plenty of non-fiction scholarship about the big guy, but for the most part these books are unique, and they tell original stories not in the medium of film like all the other ones do. First, I had a couple of picture books from when I was a little lad that my mom used to read to me before bed. I still have them. Godzilla on Monster Island and Who's Afraid of Godzilla. Both are little more than bedtime stories illustrating simple life lessons. Look at this one with the painted interiors. These were painted by a guy named Bob Eggleton, a sci-fi artist who specializes in book covers and is a massive Godzilla fan. I'm sure it's mostly nostalgia, but I love his work. It has this dreamy, surreal quality to it. If I ever get a sci-fi novel published, I want him to do the cover. Bob, if you're out there, thanks, man. You mean a lot. While these books were clearly meant for babies, I heard that Scott, whatever his name is, had a series of novels about the big guy. I heard they were children's novels, but I didn't realize that until I actually got a hold of them. Christ, they look like something I read in the second grade. There were actually four of them, but I couldn't get the one entitled Godzilla King of the Monsters, which is basically a child's retelling of the first film, which is a contradiction in terms. I guess this means that my collection is incomplete at the moment, but I gotta say, when it comes to Godzilla collections, I win. Anyway, the first one I have is Godzilla Invades America, which, as the title suggests, involves the monster stomping on California and ending up in Las Vegas. The main character is a 12-year-old Japanese boy who has psychic powers and can read Godzilla's mind. Yep, it's one of those stories. He meets up with a Japanese scientist guy who's studying Godzilla, and he teaches the boy how to communicate with him. There's also a thing about a giant scorpion that appears in the desert that shoots lightning out its tail. Naturally, Godzilla and the scorpion fight. At first, but then they become totes besties and run around having fun. Yeah, there's this thing about Godzilla being lonely and not having friends. You can tell this was tailored to little Godzilla fans. Anyway, he finally decides the scorpion is evil because the psychic boy tells him so, and there's also the giant spider and the praying mantis, and they whoop ass in Las Vegas. Also, there's an Elvis impersonator. Hail to the king, baby! And Godzilla goes home in the end. Next would come Journey to Monster Island, which features a brother and sister psychic this time, being coerced by the same scientist guy in the first into reading Godzilla's mind and leading him to a small island in the Pacific. Along the way, Godzilla raises hell and gets into a fight with the other monsters who they're trying to lead home. At this home is Rodan and Anguirus, who are supposed to have already been alive by this point. Some assholes try to kidnap the kids and take over the island, but they get Godzilla to save them, and it's happy in the end. Lastly, there's Godzilla vs. the Space Monster, which features not an actual psychic kid, but a kid who gets possessed by an alien mind creature and then becomes psychic and can read Godzilla's mind. I guess it was progressive. As the cover suggests, this time he fights Ghidorah, teaming up with the other monsters and launching an assault against him. And it's not like Destroy All Monsters where there's one big fight at the end. No, it's staggered, with Godzilla fighting him alone first, then Mothra fighting him, then the other monsters, and finally everyone together in one big monster brawl. This one was easily the best, even if it was still childish and silly, but it really took me back to when I was a kid, and I thought Godzilla was a noble warrior who was the only monster who could stand against the evil Ghidorah. These books were really nostalgic, bringing me back to a time when anything was possible and I believed in the heroism of a beast. Then there's the real books. I say real, these are just as gimmicky and stupid, but they're less original, if you'll believe that. First, we have Godzilla Returns, named after the dark, gritty Japanese reboot in 1984, known in America as Godzilla 1985. The 80s, man. I miss them. It's kind of a recount of that film, showing Godzilla coming up from the depths and reintegrating into society. The best bits are the little fan moments, like saying Raymond Burr's character from the original film was real and quoting his dialogue directly. It's a cute little touch. One of the most interesting aspects of the book is how it delves into the lives of the human characters, actually giving them some interesting backstory and motivations, showing them as more than just expositionary machines. I think this is a key component of any monster movie. At the end of the day, we have to identify with the human characters because most of us, with some exceptions, are human and just can't relate to a giant monster destroying everything. I mean, I can, sure, but most people can't. And this is where the medium of literature would really shine, showing who these people are and giving us a chance to get to know them. After that, they actually preempted one of the titles, Godzilla 2000, though it has little to do with the film of the same name. This time, Godzilla attacks America, making his way from the Pacific coast all the way to New York City, all the while a meteor tears toward Earth. As it does so, numerous other monsters awaken, like the giant praying mantises, Rodan and Varan, and even Mothra makes an appearance. Strangely, she doesn't have her twin fairies. Siracini has said it's a rights issue. One of the best scenes I felt is when Godzilla has a showdown with a tornado. Yeah! I always wanted to see that in a film. It just seems cool. It kind of makes sense, if you think about it. If you're familiar with the Godzilla mythos, you should know that the meteor coming to Earth heralds the arrival of King Ghidorah, Godzilla's most famous and deadly opponent, and he and Mothra team up and defeat him in the end. It's a pretty cool battle, though it's derivative of the same fight from Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, where he blows his middle head off. That film was never released theatrically in the US, though it did come out on video. On VHS, no less. So, I don't know how popular that particular film was, or how much that scene was well known. I thought it was interesting to introduce audiences to it, even if it had been done before. Again, this one tries to delve into the main characters' backstories, even if they are a bit cliché. This time it follows a teenager who gets the high score on a video game and gets recruited into the government's top-secret Stop Godzilla project, utilizing futuristic weapons. Remember how the title is Godzilla 2000? Well, even though it was only a couple of years away, everyone thought the year 2000 was going to be shiny and futuristic.
Actually, I prefer Millennium Bug.
Major, call Godzilla.
You're right, Pete. He's the only one who can help. What the?
Next would come Godzilla at World's End, which the pirate movies stole. What the hell? But instead of sailing off the edge of the map, this time there's a group of crystal creatures who live in the center of the Earth. Would they be considered aliens? I don't know. And unleash numerous monsters on the surface, like Gigan and Megalon. A group of teenage genius scientists, you know, the kind everyone can relate to, try to mind control Godzilla and get him to fight all the monsters, eventually dipping below the surface of the planet to destroy the evil crystal people. But they have one more trick up their sleeves. Biollante! Biollante is a more obscure Godzilla monster, and it's interesting that they included her here and put her on the cover, no less. I can't help but feel this may have contributed to the book's demise, putting such an unrecognizable character on the front. Again, the battle in the book kind of mirrors what happened in the film, though since it wasn't that popular, I don't think it's just a lame cop-out. Lastly, there was Godzilla vs. the Robot Monsters. This one brings three of the biggest robots of all time, Mogira, Mechagodzilla, and Mechaghidra, and Godzilla has a showdown with each of them. Anguirus makes an appearance, and he has a showdown with a Gigan, actually kicking his ass and ripping him apart. Go, you spiked little weirdo! Finally, he meets up with Godzilla, and they have an epic real monster versus robot showdown. It's awesome, to me anyway. And yeah, there's something about a teenage character and whatnot. That wasn't supposed to be the end, though. There was one last novel in production titled Godzilla and the Lost Continent. I guess he was going to fight Atlantis. Apparently the whole novel had been written, but Random House didn't want to publish it because the sales for the other books were too low, not to mention people's disappointment with the Godzilla remake. Basically, it was going to feature Atlantis rising out of the ocean and nature starting to reclaim the Earth. Godzilla would fight a new monster plucked from Saraceni's imagination, with a couple of old ones thrown in for good measure. But, sadly, it was never to be. I wonder, with the success of the Godzilla novelization, the recent Godzilla comics from IDW, and the revival of the franchise, is it possible these books could see the light of day? Maybe an entire reprint could be in order, with an actual publication of the final book just for kicks. I found an interview where he said he would be happy to write for Godzilla or any giant monsters again. So what the hell, man? Why don't you strap on a pair and get something done? I mean, that's what Godzilla would do. These books really showed the hype that was surrounding the American remake that sadly turned out to be a dud. I don't know how popular they were, but even though I was small, I remember that Godzilla was everywhere back then. And not just Godzilla. There was a small resurgence of 50s monster movies when people thought that radiation was the most magical thing in the world and could turn everyday animals into fantastical beasts of nightmare. A time when dinosaurs, giant bugs, and monsters from space seemed real, and they wanted to share these memories with their own kids. And share them they did. The remake may have been a dud, but it brought with it a new generation of fans, keeping the classics alive.
Country love この道